Good evening, friends, and welcome back to Horror Whispers. Tonight we'll be sharing 9 creepy trucker encounters on Clinton Road. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you'll never miss another night of chilling tales. Now, let's begin. My name is Cheryl Adams. I'm 33 and I've been driving a tanker for the past 5 years. It's a tough job, especially for a woman. You get the looks, the comments. You have to be twice as good and 3 times as tough. I am. I'm no nonsense. I believe in what I can see, what I can touch, and what my gauges tell me. The supernatural, ghosts, I always figured that was just a product of too much caffeine and not enough sleep. A story you tell to scare the rookies. Clinton Road, however, taught me that some stories are true whether you believe in them or not. It was a rainy night in early spring. One of those miserable, persistent drizzles that turns the whole world into a gray, blurry mess. I was hauling a half-full tanker of non-hazardous liquid, basically expensive soap, up to a depot in upstate New York. My schedule was tight, and a nasty accident on the interstate had traffic at a dead standstill. My GPS, bless its cold, logical heart, rerouted me. The fastest route, it chirped, was a county road I'd never heard of, Clinton Road. The name didn't ring any bells. To me, it was just a line on a screen, a way to save a couple of hours and keep my dispatcher happy. The moment I turned onto it, though, I felt a shift. The world outside my cab seemed to get darker, the rain heavier. The trees formed a canopy overhead, making the narrow road feel like a tunnel. My headlights reflected off the wet asphalt, the rain streaking across my windshield like tears. It was hypnotic and deeply unsettling. I'd been driving for what felt like an eternity, my eyes straining against the gloom. The only sounds were the rhythmic thump-thump of my wipers and the low drone of the engine. That's when I saw the bridge. It wasn't large, just a small, old-looking concrete arch over a creek or a bit of the reservoir. It looked ancient and out of place. And on the bridge, standing in the pouring rain, was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt completely soaked, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. He was just standing there, leaning against the railing, looking down into the dark water below. My first thought was, what on earth is a kid doing out here? It was the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, in the pouring rain. My heart lurched. Was he lost? Hurt? Did his parents' car break down? My trucker instincts, the ones that tell you to look out for people on the road, kicked in. I slowed the tanker down, the air brakes hissing in the quiet night. I needed to stop to see if he was okay. As I got closer, I flicked on my hazards, their amber lights pulsing in the darkness. I rolled down my window, the cold, damp air rushing in. "Hey, kid," I shouted over the engine. "You all right? You need help?" He didn't turn around. He didn't even seem to hear me. He just stayed there, a small, lonely silhouette against the rain-slicked road. I was almost at the foot of the bridge now, my big rig crawling at a snail's pace. I was about to call out again when he moved. He straightened up slowly, then turned his head. I couldn't see his face clearly in the gloom, it was just a pale oval. But I saw him lift his arm, he was holding something. He drew his arm back and then, with a casual flick of his wrist, he threw it. Tink. The sound was tiny, almost lost in the rain, but it was sharp and clear. It was the sound of a coin hitting my windshield. A quarter, maybe. It struck the glass right in my line of sight before bouncing off into the night. I was stunned. Not angry, just confused. Why would he do that? Was this some kind of prank? I stopped the truck completely, the cab now right at the edge of the bridge. "Hey, what was that for?" The boy didn't answer. He just turned back to the railing, lifted his other hand, and threw something else. Tink. Another coin. It hit the exact same spot on my windshield. I stared at the spot, then back at the boy. He was still just standing there, perfectly calm, as if throwing coins at passing trucks was the most normal thing in the world. A chill that had nothing to do with the open window started to creep up my spine. Something was very, very wrong. This wasn't a prank. There was no malice in it, no teenage rebellion. It was methodical. It was empty. I decided I wasn't getting out of the truck. I was going to call the police. There was a lost, possibly disturbed child on a bridge in the middle of nowhere. I reached for my phone, my eyes still locked on the boy. He turned his head toward me again, and this time I saw his face. It was pale, unnaturally so, like marble. His eyes were dark, hollow pits that seemed to suck in the light. And he wasn't looking at me, he was looking through me. There was no expression on his face, no anger, no sadness, no fear. Just a profound, soul-crushing emptiness. It was the face of something that wasn't alive. My breath hitched in my throat. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. The stories, the whispers from late-night diners came rushing back. The ghost of a boy on a bridge. They say if you throw a coin over, he'll throw it back. I hadn't thrown a coin, but he was. He lifted his hand a third time. I flinched, bracing for the sound, but he didn't throw it. He just held it out, his small hand open. On his palm, glinting in the faint light from my dashboard, was a single shiny quarter. Then slowly he smiled. It was the most horrifying thing I have ever seen. It wasn't a happy smile. It wasn't even a malicious one. It was a broken, jagged thing that didn't reach his dead eyes. It was the smile of something pretending to be human and failing miserably. That's when the terror hit me. A primal, gut-wrenching fear that turned my blood to ice. This wasn't a boy. It was a thing, an echo, a memory trapped on this bridge, forced to repeat the same action over and over, and I was now part of its loop. I didn't think. I reacted. I slammed my foot on the accelerator. The tanker roared to life, lurching forward onto the bridge. My eyes were fixed on the windshield, on the road ahead, refusing to look at him. But I could feel him there, just outside my window. I could feel his cold, empty gaze on me as I passed. As my cab cleared the bridge, I risked a glance in my passenger side mirror. He was gone. The bridge was empty. There was no sign that anyone had been there. Just the rain, the road, and the darkness. It was as if he had simply dissolved back into the night. I didn't slow down. I pushed the tanker as fast as I dared on that treacherous road, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. Every shadow seemed to take his shape. Every glint of light on my windshield looked like another coin. I was terrified he would reappear standing in the middle of the road, or worse, sitting in my passenger seat. When I finally saw the blessed, beautiful sight of the main highway, I felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost made me sick. I pulled over onto the shoulder, my whole body trembling. I sat there for a long time, listening to the rain and the sound of normal traffic, the sounds of the living world. I looked at my windshield. There were no marks, no scratches, no evidence of the coins. It was just a wet piece of glass. But I had heard them. I had seen him. I eventually got myself together and finished my route. I never told anyone the full story. Who would believe me? They'd say I was tired, that the rain was playing tricks on my eyes. But I know what I saw. I saw a lost soul, a ghost trapped in a loop of a game only he understood. I'm still a no-nonsense person. I still believe in what I can see and touch. But now I know that there are things in this world that exist just beyond our understanding. Things that are real, even if they leave no proof behind. And I know that on a rainy night on a lonely bridge in New Jersey, I met one of them. And his empty smile will haunt me for the rest of my days. My name is Gary Whitman. I'm 52 and I've been a long-haul trucker since I was old enough to get my CDL. I'm what they call a road dog, I've got more miles under my belt than most people have in their cars' odometers. I've seen this country from every conceivable angle in every kind of weather. I'm a calm man. On the road, panic is your enemy. You stay calm, you stay focused, you stay alive. I've always been proud of my ability to keep a level head. But there's a stretch of road in New Jersey that tested that calm in a way nothing ever has. It tested my eyes, my mind, and my very definition of reality. It was a run I'd done 100 times, hauling paper goods from a mill in Pennsylvania to a distribution center on Long Island. It was late, around 2 a.m., and the night was thick and heavy. As I crossed into New Jersey, a fog began to roll in. This wasn't your average morning mist. This was a Clinton Road fog. I'd been forced to use the road as a shortcut a few times over the years, usually due to accidents on the bigger highways. I'd heard the legends, of course, every trucker has, but I'd never seen anything. To me, it was just a poorly maintained, creepy road that I tried to avoid. The fog, though, was legendary in its own right. It was famous for being unnaturally thick, for appearing out of nowhere and swallowing the road whole. And tonight it was living up to its reputation. It started as wisps, ghostly fingers creeping out from the trees. Within minutes, my world had shrunk to the 20 feet of pavement illuminated by my headlights. The fog was a solid, swirling wall of white. It muffled sound, turning the familiar rumble of my engine into a distant thrum. It felt like I was driving at the bottom of the ocean. My speed dropped to a crawl, maybe 15 miles per hour. My hands were clamped on the wheel, my eyes straining to pick out the faint white line on the edge of the road. It was a hypnotic, disorienting experience. The swirling patterns of the fog in my headlights started to play tricks on my eyes. I saw shapes that weren't there, phantoms dancing just at the edge of my vision. I knew it was just fatigue and pareidolia, the brain's tendency to see patterns in randomness. I've driven through enough fog to know the feeling. I kept telling myself it was all in my head. That's when I saw him. Through a slightly thinner patch of fog, a figure emerged on the right side of the road. It was a man, and he was jogging. He was wearing shorts, a sweatshirt with the hood up, and running shoes. He was jogging away from me in the same direction I was headed. My first reaction was a jolt of disbelief. A jogger? Out here? It was after 2 a.m. on a deserted, dangerous road in a fog so thick you could barely see your own hands. It made no sense. My logical mind started, searching for explanations. Maybe his car broke down and he was running for help. But he wasn't waving his arms or trying to flag me down. He was just jogging. His pace was steady, his form perfect. He looked like he was on a morning run in a suburban park, not on a haunted road in the dead of night. I slowed down even more, not wanting to startle him. The road was too narrow to give him a wide berth. I tapped my horn lightly, a quick, friendly beep to let him know I was there. He didn't react. He didn't turn his head, didn't break his stride. He just kept jogging, his feet hitting the pavement in a steady rhythm, his body a dark silhouette against the glowing fog. A prickle of unease ran down my spine. It was strange, too strange. I leaned forward, squinting through the windshield, trying to get a better look. As my truck slowly closed the distance, I noticed more details. The sweatshirt was dark gray, the shorts black. I could see the condensation of his breath puffing out from under his hood. He seemed completely solid, completely real. My cab was almost alongside him now. I was maybe 10 feet away. I rolled down my window, the damp, cold air hitting my face. I was going to ask him if he needed a ride, if he was okay. "Hey, buddy," I called out. "Everything all right?" This time he reacted. He stopped jogging. He came to a dead stop and slowly, deliberately turned his head to look at me. I wish he hadn't. His face was in shadow, hidden by the deep hood of his sweatshirt. I couldn't see his eyes, his nose, or his mouth. It was just a patch of absolute impenetrable blackness. It wasn't that his face was obscured, it was that there was nothing there to see. It was a void in the shape of a human head. My blood ran cold. The calm, level-headed Gary Whitman vanished, replaced by a terrified man staring at an impossibility. My foot, which had been hovering over the brake, slipped and hit the accelerator. The truck lurched forward a few feet, and then he was gone. It wasn't that he ran into the woods or ducked out of sight. One moment he was there, a solid three-dimensional figure standing on the side of the road, a void under his hood. The next he had dissolved. He just faded, like smoke. He broke apart into wisps of fog and was reabsorbed into the thick white soup that surrounded us. There was no sound, no trace. Just the empty road and the swirling mist. I slammed on the brakes, the truck groaning to a halt. I sat there, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My mind was racing, trying to process what my eyes had just seen. A trick of the light? A hallucination? I've been tired on the road before. I've seen shadows move, but I have never, ever hallucinated something so detailed, so solid, only to watch it evaporate before my very eyes. I got out of the cab, my flashlight in my hand. I needed proof. I needed something to ground me back in reality. I walked to the spot where he had been standing. The beam of my flashlight cut a weak cone through the fog. I swept it back and forth over the pavement and the muddy shoulder. There were no footprints. The ground was soft and wet from the damp air. My own boots left clear, deep impressions in the mud. But where the jogger had been standing, there was nothing. The ground was untouched. It was as if he had no weight, no substance, as if he were just a projection, a memory imprinted on the fog itself. I got back in my truck, my hands trembling. The calm was shattered. The focus was gone. All that was left was a raw, primal fear. I drove the rest of that road with my eyes wide, my nerves screaming, expecting him to reappear at any moment, to step out of the fog right in front of my truck. He never did. The fog eventually thinned as I neared the end of the road, and breaking out into the clear night air felt like surfacing after being held underwater for too long. I've thought about that night 1,000 times. I've tried to rationalize it, to explain it away, but I can't. I saw a man made of fog and shadow. I saw him turn a face with no features toward me, and then I watched him cease to exist. They say Clinton Road plays tricks on you, that it preys on your mind. But what I saw wasn't a trick. It was a truth I never wanted to know, that the world is thinner than we think. And sometimes, in the right place, on the right night, you can see the ghosts that walk between the raindrops and hide within the fog. I'm still a calm man for the most part, but a part of that calm never came back from Clinton Road. It was left behind on a wet patch of pavement where a man who wasn't a man vanished into the night. If this story chilled you, don't forget to like and comment below. Now let's continue with another terrifying tale. My name is Monica Torres. I'm 29 and I drive a reefer, a refrigerated truck. I haul produce mostly up and down the East Coast. It's a solitary life, but I like it. I like the quiet hum of the reefer unit, the steady rhythm of the road, the feeling of being in my own little world, a rolling bubble of steel and glass. I'm not a big person, and I've had to learn to be tough, to be aware. You learn to trust your gut. It's the best defense you have out here. My gut has saved me from bad situations, from sketchy truck stops, from guys who get a little too friendly over the CB. But nothing in my life could have prepared me for the gut feeling I got on Clinton Road. It wasn't a warning. It was a primal scream. It was a hot, sticky night in the dead of August. The air was thick and heavy, the kind of night where the cicadas buzz so loud it feels like the trees are screaming. I was on a tight schedule. hauling a load of fresh Jersey tomatoes that needed to stay at a perfect 55 degrees. My usual route up I-287 was a parking lot, a sea of red, taillights stretching as far as the eye could see. An overturned chemical tanker, the radio said. It would be hours. My dispatcher, a stressed-out guy named Dave, called me in a panic. The tomatoes wouldn't last. He gave me the alternate Clinton Road. I'd heard the name. It was trucker folklore, a place whispered about with a mix of morbid curiosity and genuine fear. I'd always dismissed it. I'm a city girl, born and raised in Newark. I believe in tangible threats. Muggers, bad drivers, blown tires. Ghosts and goblins? That's for movies. A road is a road. The turnoff felt like a portal. One minute I was in the familiar, brightly lit world of suburban New Jersey, and the next I was plunged into an almost absolute darkness. The trees were ancient and overgrown, their branches interlocking overhead to form a dense black canopy that blotted out the moon and stars. My headlights seemed weak, swallowed by the oppressive gloom. The road was narrow and winding, and my big rig felt clumsy and out of place, an intruder in a place it didn't belong. The first thing that struck me was the silence. The constant deafening buzz of the cicadas had stopped. The moment my tires hit that asphalt, it was like a switch was flipped. The world outside my cab went completely unnaturally quiet. All I could hear was the thrum of my engine and the low mechanical drone of my reefer unit. The silence was a living thing. It pressed in on the cab, heavy and suffocating. I'd been driving for about 15 minutes, my shoulders tense, my eyes scanning the impenetrable wall of trees on either side. I needed to pull over, not for a break, but to check my reefer. The temperature gauge had been fluctuating slightly, and with a sensitive load like tomatoes, I couldn't take any chances. I found a small, muddy patch on the side of the road, barely big enough for my rig. I pulled over, leaving the engine and headlights on, and set the brake with a loud hiss. As I sat there for a moment, letting the engine idle, the feeling started. It began as a tiny prickle on the back of my neck, the kind you get when you feel like you're being watched. I scanned my mirrors. Nothing but the dark, empty road behind me. I looked into the woods on my right. Nothing but a black, tangled mess of trees and shadows. I told myself it was just the creepy reputation of the road getting to me. I was psyching myself out. "Get a grip, Monica," I muttered, my own voice sounding loud and foreign in the silent cab. I grabbed my flashlight and was about to open the door when the feeling intensified. It was no longer a prickle. It was a heavy weight, a physical pressure. It was the undeniable, absolute certainty that I was not alone. The feeling was coming from the woods, from the deep, dark woods on the passenger side of my truck. My hand froze on the door handle. My heart started to beat a little faster. I slowly turned my head and stared into the blackness of the forest. My headlights cut a swath of light down the road, but they didn't penetrate the woods. It was like a solid wall of night. I stared, my eyes straining, trying to see what my gut was screaming at me was there, and then I saw them. They weren't there one second and there the next. They simply opened, like a creature waking up, 2 points of light deep within the trees, maybe 50 yards in. They were a dull, burning red, like the embers of a dying fire, or the taillights of a car seen through a thick fog. But they weren't taillights. They were too high off the ground for that, and they were perfectly still. And they were watching me. I couldn't breathe. It felt like a fist had clenched around my lungs. I stared at the 2 red lights, and they stared back. They didn't blink. They didn't move. They just burned with a steady, malevolent intensity. I tried to rationalize it. A reflection? The eyes of an animal? A deer, maybe? Number. I've seen deer in my headlights 1,000 times. Their eyes reflect a bright greenish white, and they're always nervous, twitching, ready to bolt. These were not the eyes of a deer. They were calm, patient, predatory. And they were big, and set far apart. Whatever was attached to those eyes was massive. A cold, paralyzing fear began to seep into me. It was a fear I had never known, a deep, instinctual terror that bypassed all rational thought. It was the fear of a prey animal that has just realized it's been cornered by a predator. My hand was still on the door handle, and I realized with a jolt of horror that I had been about to step outside. I would have been out there in the dark with that. I slowly, carefully pulled my hand back from the door. I didn't want to make any sudden movements. I felt like if I so much as breathed too loudly, it would charge. The two red eyes remained fixed on me, unblinking. I could feel the intelligence behind them. This was not a dumb animal. It was aware. It was watching me. It was waiting. What did it want? The question echoed in the terrifying silence of my mind. I was trapped in my cab, a metal box that suddenly felt as fragile as glass. The woods were no longer just trees, they were a lair. The road was no longer a path, it was a trap. Minutes stretched into an eternity, me and the eyes. A silent, terrifying standoff. I thought about honking my horn, but I was terrified of what the sound might provoke. I thought about throwing the truck in gear and speeding away, but I was afraid to take my eyes off the red lights. Afraid that if I looked away for even a second, they would move. They would be at my window. Then it got worse. A low sound began to emanate from the woods. It was a deep, guttural vibration, more felt than heard. It was the kind of sound that resonates in your bones and your teeth. It was a growl. But it wasn't the growl of a bear or a dog. It was lower, rougher, filled with a kind of ancient hatred that made the hair on my arms stand up. It was the sound of something that had been hungry for a very, very long time. The growl was the breaking point. The paralysis of fear shattered, replaced by a desperate, frantic need to escape. I wasn't thinking about the tomatoes anymore. I wasn't thinking about my dispatcher. I was thinking about survival. My hand shot out and slammed the gear shift into drive. I stomped on the accelerator. The engine roared and the truck lurched forward, tires spinning in the mud before finding purchase on the asphalt. I didn't dare look back in the mirror. I kept my eyes glued to the road ahead, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. I drove like a madwoman, pushing the rig faster than I should have on that winding road. I didn't care. I just needed to put distance between me and those eyes, between me and that sound. Every shadow seemed to hold a hint of red. Every dark shape in the trees looked like it was about to lunge. I don't know how long I drove, my heart hammering against my ribs, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. But then I saw it, the blessed, beautiful glow of streetlights. I had reached the end of the road. As I merged onto the well-lit, populated highway, it felt like I had surfaced from a deep, dark ocean. The sounds of normal traffic, of other cars, of the world of the living washed over me, and I almost wept with relief. I drove for another 10 miles before I felt safe enough to pull into a brightly lit, crowded service plaza. I parked the truck, killed the engine, and just sat there, trembling uncontrollably. The silence in the cab was no longer threatening. It was just empty. I finally got out and did my check of the reefer unit. The temperature was fine. The tomatoes were fine, but I wasn't. I walked to the passenger side of my truck, my flashlight beam shaking. I looked at the side of the trailer, the part that had been facing the woods, and I saw them. 3 long, deep scratches in the metal running from the middle of the trailer down toward the back. They were wide and deep, gouged into the aluminum as if by giant claws. They hadn't been there before. I know my rig, I would have seen them. I touched the edges of the scratches. They were fresh. I looked back at the dark highway in the direction of Clinton Road, and I felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the night air. It had found me. It had gotten close enough to touch me. I never told anyone the real story. I said the scratches came from a low-hanging branch. People believe in branches, they don't believe in red eyes and impossible growls and things that live in the dark spaces of the world. But I believe, because I sat in my cab and stared into the eyes of something that should not exist. And I know that if I had opened that door, if I had stepped out of my truck, I would have been swallowed by the darkness. I would have become just another story whispered by truckers in the dead of night. My name is Frankie Morales. I'm 41 years old, and for the last 2 decades, my world has been the 18 wheels of a Peterbilt, the endless ribbon of asphalt, and the hum of the diesel engine. I've hauled everything from produce to industrial machinery across every state in the lower 48. I've seen blizzards in the Rockies that would freeze a man solid in minutes, dealt with washed-out roads in the bayou, and navigated the chaotic tangle of LA traffic. I'm not a man who spooks easily. I'm practical. You see a problem? You solve it. You feel tired, you drink coffee, you feel scared. Well, I never really did. Not until that night on Clinton Road. It was a late October run, the kind where the air has a bite and the trees are skeletal fingers scratching at a bruised purple sky. I was hauling a load of mixed goods from Patterson up toward the New York border. It was a short, familiar route, but my dispatcher had warned me about a jackknifed rig on Route 23. The backup was miles long. He suggested a detour, Clinton Road. I'd heard the name before. Truckers are a superstitious bunch, and Clinton Road was the kind of place they talked about in hushed tones at 3 a.m. in greasy spoon diners. They'd talk about phantom headlights, strange figures in the woods, a ghost boy on a bridge. I always just grunted and sipped my coffee. Campfire stories for grown men, that's all I thought they were. A road is a road, pavement, paint, and trees. What's there to be scared of? The turnoff was unassuming, a narrow mouth swallowing my rig into the darkness of the West Milford woods. The road was worse than I expected. It was tight, winding, and poorly lit, with no shoulder to speak of. My high beams cut a lonely tunnel through the oppressive dark, the trees crowding in on either side like silent, judgmental spectators. The silence was the first thing that got to me. No other cars, no houses, just the rumble of my engine and the crunch of fallen leaves under my tires. It felt like driving into another world, one that had been forgotten by time. I'd been on the road for maybe 10 minutes when I first saw them. 2 pinpricks of light in my rearview mirror. I didn't think much of it at first. Another driver probably taking the same detour. I was actually relieved. A little company on this godforsaken stretch couldn't hurt. But the lights grew bigger, faster than they should have. This guy was moving. He closed the distance in seconds, his headlights burning into my mirrors, blinding me. It was an old pickup truck, maybe a late 70s Ford or Chevy, rusted and beaten. The kind of truck you see rotting in a farmer's field, not tearing down a road like a bat out of hell. It was riding my bumper so close I couldn't even see its grill, just the blinding glare of its high beams. "All right, pal, back off," I muttered, tapping my brakes as a gentle warning. The truck didn't react. If anything, it got closer. The light filled my cab, erasing the shadows, making the world outside my windshield seem even darker. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. This wasn't just an impatient driver, this was aggressive, this was a threat. I sped up a little, hoping to put some distance between us. The road was curving now, a sharp bend to the left. I took it as best I could, my trailer groaning in protest. The pickup stayed glued to me, its lights unwavering. As I came out of the turn, he made his move. He swerved into the oncoming lane, not that there was any oncoming traffic, and pulled up alongside me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I glanced over, ready to lay on my horn and give him a piece of my mind. But what I saw froze the words in my throat. There was no one driving. The driver's seat was empty. The steering wheel was still. I blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light, a reflection. I stared hard, my eyes watering from the strain. The cab of that pickup was dark and vacant, yet it was keeping perfect pace with me, its engine roaring like a wounded animal. A cold dread, colder than any winter wind, washed over me. My mind was screaming, "This isn't possible, this can't be happening." But my eyes weren't lying. Then the pickup swerved toward me. The screech of metal on metal was deafening as his fender scraped along my trailer. The whole rig shuddered. I fought the wheel, trying to keep from being pushed into the dense line of trees on the right. The pickup slammed into me again, harder this time. It was a deliberate, violent act. It was trying to run me off the road. "What do you want?" I screamed, the sound swallowed by the chaos. I floored it. The Peterbilt's engine bellowed, and I started to pull ahead. For a second, I thought I had him. The pickup fell back slightly. I risked a glance in my side mirror. It was still there, a dark shape with two burning eyes. And then it came at me again, not at my trailer, but at my cab. It was aiming for my front tire. I knew what that meant. A blown steer tire at this speed would be catastrophic. I'd lose all control. The rig would flip, or jackknife, or plow straight into the woods. It was a death sentence. I yanked the wheel to the left, putting the center line between us just as the pickup lunged. Its bumper missed my tire by inches. The force of my swerve sent the trailer fishtailing wildly behind me. I was fighting for my life, wrestling with a 40-ton beast on a narrow, winding road, all while being hunted by a ghost. The road straightened out for a short stretch. Ahead I saw the faint glow of what had to be a bridge. Dead Man's Curve, they called it. I remembered the name from the diner stories, a notoriously sharp, unbanked turn right after a small bridge over the reservoir. If I didn't slow down, I'd never make it, but if I did, the phantom truck would be on me. He knew it too. As if sensing my hesitation, he surged forward again, ramming into the side of my cab with a sickening crunch. The passenger side window exploded, showering me with glass. The impact threw me against my door, and for a terrifying moment the rig veered toward the left, toward the reservoir. I could see the dark, still water through the trees. With a surge of adrenaline, I wrenched the wheel back, my muscles screaming. I had to end this now. My plan was desperate, probably stupid, but it was all I had. I let my speed drop just a little, feigning that the truck was getting the better of me. The phantom pickup took the bait, pulling up alongside me again for another attack, ready to deliver the final push. Just as its front fender aligned with my door, I slammed on the brakes. Not a gentle tap this time. I hit them with everything I had. The air brakes hissed and screamed, the tires howled in protest, and the entire rig shuddered violently. The maneuver was incredibly dangerous. I could have jackknifed right there, but it worked. The driverless pickup, caught completely by surprise, shot past me. Its momentum carried it forward, straight toward the curve. I saw it for a clear second under the moonlight, a shell of rust and fury, utterly empty. It didn't slow down. It didn't turn. It just kept going, straight off the road at the sharpest point of the curve. There was no splash, no crash, no explosion. One moment the truck was there, a solid, terrifying presence. The next, it was gone. It didn't plummet into the water. It just vanished into thin air right at the edge of the road. The roar of its engine was cut off, replaced by an unnerving silence. Its headlights blinked out of existence. I sat there in my cab, my rig stalled in the middle of the road, the engine idling roughly. My breath came in ragged, painful gasps. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel. The passenger window was a gaping hole, and a cold wind was whipping through the cab. I slowly, cautiously put the truck in gear and rolled forward. I stopped before the curve and got out, my legs feeling like jelly. I walked to the edge of the road where the truck had disappeared. There were no skid marks other than my own. No broken guardrail. There was no guardrail to begin with. No sign that another vehicle had been there at all. Just my own tire tracks in the dirt and the dark, silent woods. I got back in my truck and drove the rest of the way down Clinton Road without seeing another soul. When I finally hit the main highway again, the bright, ordinary streetlights felt like a lifeline. I pulled into the first truck stop I saw, the engine still, running, and just sat there for an hour, shaking. I never told the company what really happened. I said a deer ran out and I swerved, hitting a tree branch that broke the window. They docked my pay for the damage. I didn't care. I've been driving for 20 years. I've seen it all. But I've never taken that detour again. And to this day, when I'm driving alone at night and a pair of headlights gets a little too close, a cold sweat runs down my back. Because I know that some roads don't lead to a destination. They lead to a memory you can never escape. And I know that on Clinton Road I wasn't just being tailgated. I was being hunted by the ghost of a machine, a phantom that wanted to drag me down into the same darkness it was born from. Did you enjoy this story? Let me know in the comments and don't forget to like this video. And now, let's move on to our next story. My name is Eddie Lawson, but on the road I'm Big Ed. At 47, I've spent more than half my life behind the wheel of a big rig, and for the last 15 years it's been a flatbed. I'm the guy they call for the awkward stuff, the massive excavators that look like metal dinosaurs, the oversized prefabricated walls that need 2 escort vehicles and a prayer to get through an intersection. I'm built for the job, I guess. Big, solid, not easily moved. People say I'm like a refrigerator with a driver's license. I take that as a compliment. In my line of work, being steady is everything. You have to be professional, you have to be calm, and above all, you have to respect the law. I've got a driving record so clean you could eat off it. In 25 years, I've collected maybe 2-3 minor moving violations. Seeing those flashing red and blue lights in my mirror is a scenario I actively engineer my life to avoid. It's a headache. It means delays, paperwork, and a hit to the bottom line. It's a problem to be solved through compliance and caution. But the lights I saw on Clinton Road, they weren't a problem to be solved. They were a question without an answer. They weren't looking for a fine or a license and registration. They were looking for something else entirely, something lost to time. And for 10 terrifying minutes, they thought they had found it in me. It was a night in mid-November, the kind of cold, clear night that only late autumn can produce. The air was so crisp and clean it felt like it could crack, and the sky was a spill of diamond dust stars. I was deadheading, my flatbed trailer empty and rattling behind me, making my way back to the yard in Secaucus. The drop-off, a hefty piece of milling equipment, had been near the Delaware Water Gap, and the drive back was usually a straight, easy shot down I-80. It was late, pushing 3 a.m., and the highway was a ghost town. I was making fantastic time, the rumble of my Cummins engine a familiar, comforting mantra in the quiet of the cab. I was already thinking about my own bed, a rare luxury in this line of work. That's when the night took a turn. Up ahead, a series of brilliant flashing signs lit up the darkness. Road closed ahead, all lanes blocked. A bad one. A sea of flashing emergency lights was visible in the distance. The radio confirmed it. A jackknife tanker had shut down I-80 completely, both east and westbound. It would be hours, maybe even until morning, before they cleared it. My GPS, a usually reliable Garmin that had been my co-pilot for years, started having a fit. It kept insisting I make a U-turn and try to get back on the closed highway, its synthesized voice growing more frantic with each recalculation. Turn around when possible, it chirped, oblivious. I shut it off in disgust and reached for my real co-pilot, the one that never needed a satellite. My old, dog-eared Rand McNally Road Atlas. Its pages were soft as cloth, stained with coffee and years of greasy fingerprints. It was a relic, but it had never led me astray. I spread the atlas across my passenger seat, the small map light casting a warm glow on the intricate web of lines. My finger traced the thick red line of I-80 to the point where I was stopped, then started searching for a bypass. And I saw it, a thin blue squiggly line that snaked its way through a vast dark green patch of forest on the map. It looked like it would eventually spit me out onto Route 23 well past the accident. It was a county road, Clinton Road. The name registered with a faint, distant clang of recognition. It was a piece of trucker folklore. You hear the stories at 3 a.m. in truck stop diners whispered over lukewarm coffee, tales of phantom headlights that chase you, of a ghost boy on a bridge who throws coins, of strange creatures in the woods. I'd always filed them under campfire stories for lonely drivers. I'm a man who believes in tangible things: torque, air pressure, the solid weight of steel. A road is pavement and paint. What's there to be scared of? Besides, I was tired, my flatbed was empty, and I just wanted to get home. I figured my big, loud, empty rig was probably scarier than any local haunt. With a shrug, I folded the atlas, started the truck, and took the exit that would lead me into the legend. The transition was immediate and jarring. One moment I was on a well-lit 4-lane highway, and the next I was plunging into a narrow, winding tunnel of absolute darkness. The road was as creepy as advertised. The trees were ancient and gnarled, their bare branches reaching out like skeletal fingers clawing at the starlit sky. They formed a canopy that blotted out most of the ambient light, making the world outside my cab feel close and suffocating. The silence was the most profound I'd ever experienced. The usual hum of distant traffic was gone, replaced by a deep, unnatural quiet that seemed to absorb the sound of my own engine. With no load to weigh it down, my flatbed felt light and skittish. Every dip and crack in the poorly maintained asphalt sent a jolt through the cab. The truck rattled and groaned, its sounds alien and loud in the oppressive stillness. I was on edge, I'll admit it. The spooky stories, which had seemed so ridiculous in the bright lights of the highway, were now crawling around in the back of my mind, a low, persistent hum of anxiety beneath the rumble of my diesel engine. I gripped the wheel tighter, my eyes scanning the impenetrable darkness on either side of the road. I'd been on that unsettling road for maybe 20 minutes, the hypnotic twists and turns starting to lull me into a tense rhythm, when my world exploded in color. My entire cab was suddenly violently flooded with a brilliant strobing light. Red and blue. Red and blue. My heart didn't just jump. It felt like it tried to punch its way out of my chest. Instinct took over. My foot hit the brake and my eyes shot to the rearview mirror. There it was. A police car. It was right on my tail, so close I couldn't see the bumper, its light bar flashing with a silent, frantic urgency. "Ah, hell," I grumbled, the words a puff of white in the cold cab. My mind raced, doing a frantic diagnostic. What now? Was I speeding? I glanced at the speedometer. The needle was hovering right at 40 miles per hour, which felt dangerously fast on this winding road, but was likely the legal limit. Was a taillight out? The constant rattling could have shaken a bulb loose. I did a quick scan of my gauges and warning lights. Everything was green. Everything was normal. Still, you don't argue with the flashing lights. You don't provoke, you comply. I was a professional. I eased off the accelerator, my eyes scanning the narrow shoulder for a safe place to pull over. I found a spot that was marginally wider than the rest of the road, a small, muddy patch of earth that offered just enough room. I guided the big rig over, the tires sinking slightly into the soft ground. With a loud hiss of the air brakes, I brought all 20 tons of my empty truck to a complete stop. I went through the motions, the well-rehearsed drill of any trucker being pulled over. I killed the country music station on the radio, plunging the cab back into that unnerving silence. I powered down my passenger side window, then rolled my own down, letting the frigid November air flood the cab. I placed both of my large hands on the top of the steering wheel in plain sight. I knew the drill. Now I just had to wait. And I waited, and waited. The lights continued their silent, maddening dance, painting the bare trees in frantic, alternating strokes of red and blue. The strobing light reflected off my mirrors, my dashboard, the chrome of my gear shift, turning the inside of my cab into a disorienting disco. But nothing else happened. The officer didn't get out of his car. The spotlight didn't flick on to illuminate my cab. The PA system didn't crackle to life with instructions. The car just sat there, a silent, flashing sentinel about 20 feet behind my trailer. I could see its silhouette clearly in my side mirror. It was an old Ford Crown Victoria, the boxy classic model that most departments had phased out years ago. It was white, with a single old-school light bar on the roof, not the sleek, low-profile LEDs they use now. "Okay, what's the holdup?" I muttered to myself, my initial anxiety starting to curdle into confusion and annoyance. Maybe he was running my plates. That could take a minute. I stayed put, my hands on the wheel, trying to be patient. But the silence was what was really getting to me. It was an absolute void of sound from the car behind me. There was no engine hum, no crackle of a police radio, no sound of an officer talking to dispatch. There was only the relentless, silent flashing of the lights. It was fundamentally wrong. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 2 or 3 minutes, a new feeling began to creep in, cold and sharp. This wasn't right. This wasn't a normal traffic stop. A cop doesn't just sit there like that. They are men and women of action. They're either approaching your window with a ticket book or they're on the PA telling you to move along. This silent, static waiting was a violation of the procedural script I knew so well. I leaned my head out of the open window, the cold air biting at my face, and looked back. The Crown Vic was still there, its lights still strobing, a silent, pulsing heart in the darkness. I couldn't see the officer inside. The constant flashing and the glare on the windshield made it impossible. It was just a dark, indistinct shape behind the wheel. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice sounding surprisingly weak, swallowed by the vast empty woods. "Everything okay back there?" There was no response, not a flicker of movement, not a sound. Just the relentless, silent flashing. A new kind of anxiety began to bloom in my chest, a species of fear I wasn't familiar with. This wasn't about getting a ticket anymore. This was about the profound wrongness of the situation. Something was terribly wrong. My mind, always looking for a practical solution, jumped to a logical, if frightening, conclusion. Was the officer having a medical emergency? A heart attack? A seizure? He'd pulled me over and then collapsed at the wheel. The thought sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I was a big guy. I knew basic first aid. I could help. "All right, that's it," I said to the empty cab. I unbuckled my seatbelt, the click echoing loudly. I was ready to get out, to walk back there and check on him, to be the responsible citizen. As my hand reached for the cold metal of the door handle, a sound finally broke the silence. It came from the police car. It wasn't a siren or a voice, or the sound of a door opening. It was a single, sharp burst of radio static, loud and crackling in the dead of night. It sounded old, distorted, like a transmission struggling to cross a vast distance of time, and through the static a voice emerged. It was faint, tinny, and garbled, a ghost in the machine. "Shh. All units, be advised. Shh. Pursuit in progress on Clinton Road. Shh. Suspect is considered armed and shh." dangerous. The transmission dissolved back into a hiss and then into absolute silence. My blood didn't just run cold, it felt like it turned to ice slush in my veins. I froze, my hand hovering inches from the door handle. A pursuit? An armed suspect? Was I in the middle of a high-stakes police action? But that made no sense. There was no pursuit. There was just me, my empty flatbed, and this one silent car. And the transmission? It had sounded so incredibly old. It wasn't the crisp digital sound of modern police radios. It was the fuzzy AM radio quality of a broadcast from a 50-year-old movie. My heart was pounding a frantic, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I looked back at the car again, my eyes wide with a dawning, terrifying understanding. The flashing lights seemed to slow down, their rhythm becoming less frantic and more hypnotic, like a slow, deep breath. And in the split second of darkness between the flashes, when the world returned to its natural black and white, I saw it. The car looked wrong. It wasn't solid, it was translucent, faded, like a memory struggling to hold its form. I could see the faint outlines of the trees through the body of the Crown Victoria. It was like a photograph that had been left out in the sun for too long. Its colors and substance bleached away, leaving only a ghostly impression of what it once was. I shook my head violently, trying to clear the image. "You're tired, Ed," I told myself, my voice a harsh whisper. "You're exhausted and you're seeing things." It's a trick of the light, but I knew it wasn't. I knew what I was seeing. I had to get out of there. The instinct to flee was overwhelming. But another part of me, the stubborn, practical part, needed to be sure. I decided to get out, not to help, but to confirm my own sanity. I needed to see it with my own eyes, without the filter of my truck's mirrors and windows. I pushed my door open, the hinges groaning in protest. The dome light came on, and I was about to step down onto the running board to plant my feet on solid ground and face this impossibility head-on. That's when the siren wailed. It was a single deafening, soul-shattering blast of sound that ripped through the night. But it was the wrong sound. It wasn't the modern, multi-toned high-low yelp of a contemporary police car. It was an old, mechanical siren. The kind that had to physically wind up to its peak and then slowly wind down. It was a mournful rising and falling cry, a sound I hadn't heard in person since I was a small child watching parades in the 1970s. It was the wail of a ghost. The sound rooted me to the spot, my body paralyzed with a primal fear. I stood there, one foot in the cab and one foot out, and I watched, mesmerized, as the police car began to move. It didn't pull around me to continue a pursuit. It started to back up. It rolled backwards, slowly and deliberately, its ghostly, transparent form gliding over the asphalt. Its silent lights continued their hypnotic flashing, and the mournful, winding siren sound began to fade as it retreated down the dark road. It backed up and up and up, its form growing fainter and more translucent with every foot it traveled. It was like it was receding not just in space but in time. It rounded a sharp curve in the road, and its lights, its sound, and its very presence vanished from the world. And then there was only the profound, suffocating silence and the impenetrable darkness of Clinton Road. The flashing lights were gone. The siren was gone. The car was gone. I stood there for a full minute, frozen in my half-in, half-out position, my mind struggling to catch up with the reality of what I had just witnessed. Had I imagined it all? Was I so tired that I had conjured a full-blown auditory and visual hallucination, complete with a vintage soundtrack? It seemed more plausible than the alternative. With a shudder, I pulled myself back into the cab and slammed the door shut, locking it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the gear shift. I took a deep, ragged breath and then another, trying to force the logic back into my brain. Maybe it was an elaborate prank. Some local kids with a restored, decommissioned police car and a powerful sound system. But the way it looked, so faded and ethereal, the way it just vanished around the bend, no prank could explain that. I had to get out of there. I put the truck in gear, my foot stomping on the accelerator with more force than necessary. The engine roared and the tires spun in the mud for a moment before finding purchase. I pulled back onto the road, not caring if I was speeding anymore. I needed to put as much distance as possible between me and that spot. As I approached the same curve where the phantom car had disappeared, a morbid curiosity got the better of me. I slowed down, my eyes scanning the darkness, expecting to see something. Maybe the car parked on the shoulder with its lights off. Maybe tire tracks in the dirt where it had turned around. There was nothing. The road was empty. There were no side roads, no driveways, no hidden turnoffs. There was absolutely nowhere for a car to have gone. It had simply ceased to be there. I drove the rest of the way down Clinton Road in a cold sweat, my eyes darting to my rearview mirror every few seconds, half expecting to see those silent flashing lights reappear. They never did. When I finally broke free from the woods and hit the bright, beautiful, ordinary lights of Route 23, a wave of relief so powerful it made me dizzy washed over me. I didn't go straight to the yard. I pulled into the first 24-hour truck stop I saw, the parking lot a sanctuary of light and noise. I parked my rig, but I left the engine running. I needed the sound, the vibration, the proof of my own solid mechanical reality. I stumbled into the diner and ordered a coffee I didn't want, just to be around other people, to hear the clatter of plates and the murmur of conversation. I finally made it back to the yard as the sun was starting to bleed over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gray. One of the other old-timers, a guy named Sal who had been driving since the dawn of time, was there, getting his truck ready for an early run. He took one look at my pale, haggard face. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Ed," he said, taking a slow sip from his steaming styrofoam cup of coffee. The words hung in the air. I let out a shaky breath, a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Worse, Sal," I said, my voice hoarse and unfamiliar to my own ears. "I think I got pulled over by one." I told him the whole story. I expected him to laugh, to clap me on the shoulder and tell me I needed to get more sleep. But he didn't. He just listened intently, his face serious, nodding slowly as I spoke. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time, looking off into the distance as if watching a memory play out. "Clinton Road, right?" he finally asked. I just nodded, unable to speak. "Yeah," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Heard that one before, more than once. The story goes that a state trooper was killed on that road way back. Sometime in the 60s, I think. Pulled over a car for a routine stop and the driver ambushed him. Shot him and left him for dead. They say he never really clocked out. Some nights when it's quiet, he's still on patrol. Still trying to finish his last stop, still looking for the car that got away." The words hit me like a physical blow. The old Crown Victoria, the distorted vintage radio call about a pursuit, the old-fashioned winding siren. It all clicked into place with a horrifying, perfect clarity. I hadn't been pulled over for a broken taillight or for speeding. I had been pulled over by a memory, a violent, tragic echo imprinted on that lonely stretch of road. A psychic loop doomed to play out over and over, ensnaring anyone unlucky enough to fit the profile. An empty rig, a lone driver in the dead of night. I'm a man who respects the law. It's tangible, it's written down, it makes sense. But that night I learned that there are other laws, older and stranger ones, that govern the dark places of the world. I broke the speed limit getting off Clinton Road that night. And I don't feel a single ounce of guilt, because I know that phantom officer wasn't going to write me a ticket. He was looking for someone else, a ghost from his own past. and I thank God with every fiber of my being that he eventually realized it wasn't me. My name is Clara Jennings. I'm 36 years old and I live my life between the painted lines of the American highway. I'm an independent hauler, which is just a formal way of saying I'm my own boss, my own dispatcher, and my own mechanic when things get ugly. My rig, a classic 1998 Kenworth W900L, is my business partner and my home. I call her Kenny. She's a magnificent beast of chrome and deep purple paint with a sleeper cab that's more comfortable than any apartment I've ever rented. That truck isn't just a machine, she's my ticket to freedom. I take the jobs I want, I go where I want, and I answer to no one but the delivery deadline. I'm a creature of the night, always have been. There's a special kind of magic to driving when the rest of the world is asleep. The highways empty out, the radio plays better music, and it feels like it's just you, your truck, and the endless ribbon of dark asphalt stretching out toward a horizon you can't see. It's a solitary existence, and in that solitude you see things. The way fog can swallow a mountain whole, the eerie green glow of a meteor streaking across the plains of Nebraska, the strange, silent dance of heat lightning in a distant storm. I've seen a lot of strange things on those lonely nights, but nothing in my 36 years, nothing in the 1,000,000+ miles I've driven could have prepared me for the gentle, impossible, and profoundly unsettling kindness of the diner I found on Clinton Road. It was a miserable night in the first week of December, the kind of night that makes you question your career choices. A freezing rain was falling, a nasty, insidious mixture of ice and water that was determined to turn the world into a treacherous, glittering trap. It wasn't snow, which can be beautiful, or rain, which is just wet. It was a glaze, a slick, invisible coating of pure malice on every surface. I was hauling a load of Christmas decorations, the irony was not lost on me, from a sprawling warehouse in eastern Pennsylvania to a chain of department stores scattered across New England. My trailer was filled to the brim with artificial trees, miles of tinsel, and boxes upon boxes of fragile glass ornaments. The delivery schedule was brutally tight. They needed this stuff on the shelves for the weekend rush. Naturally, the main highways were a complete nightmare. The freezing rain had turned I-84 and I-287 into a demolition derby. The CB radio was a cacophony of panicked voices and accident reports, jackknifed rigs, multi-car pileups, road closures. My delivery schedule wasn't just shot, it was obliterated. I was sitting in a dead stop, watching the ice build up on my windshield wipers, feeling the frustration coiling in my gut. I was tired. My stomach was growling with a hunger that had long since passed annoyance and entered the realm of genuine pain. And every minute I sat still, I was losing money. I pulled out my worn road atlas, the paper soft and familiar under my fingertips. I spread it across my massive steering wheel, tracing the routes with a finger. I needed a way through the mess. And there it was. A thin blue line, almost a footnote on the map that snaked through a vast, dark green area of northern New Jersey. It was a county road. Clinton Road, I knew the name. Every trucker on the East Coast knows the name. It's a legend, a boogeyman, a place of phantom trucks, ghostly figures, and a general all-encompassing dread. Most drivers, even the most jaded old-timers, avoid it like the plague. But looking at the map, it was my only viable option. It was a straight shot, more or less, to a highway that was still open. I was desperate, and besides, a small, rebellious part of me was curious. I'd heard the stories for years. Maybe it was time I saw the place for myself, and I figured my big, warm, brightly lit Kenworth was a safe enough bubble to travel in. Kenny had gotten me through blizzards, floods, and inner-city riots. Surely she could handle one spooky road. I navigated the back roads off the highway, and the turnoff for Clinton Road was as unassuming as it was ominous. It was a narrow, dark mouth that swallowed my big rig whole. The change was instantaneous. The temperature gauge seemed to drop a few degrees. The world outside my cab became a maelstrom of sleet and darkness. The road was even worse than I could have imagined. The freezing rain had transformed the already poorly maintained asphalt into a ribbon of black ice. It was like driving on greased glass. The trees, ancient and heavy with a shimmering coat of ice, drooped low over the road. Their branches, like skeletal arms, scraped and screeched against the roof of my trailer. The sound was a nerve-shredding symphony of fingernails on a chalkboard, a constant grating reminder of how close and menacing the forest was. I was crawling, my speedometer needle barely hovering at 10 miles per hour. My entire body was tense, a single coiled muscle of concentration. Every tiny correction of the steering wheel, every gentle tap of the brakes was a high-stakes gamble. My knuckles were white, my jaw was clenched, and I was fighting to keep 80,000 pounds of truck, trailer, and Christmas cheer from sliding into a ditch or jackknifing into a tree. After about an hour of this white-knuckle, soul-draining driving, I was starting to seriously regret my decision. The curiosity had long since evaporated, replaced by a cold, gnawing anxiety. I was exhausted, my eyes burning from the intense focus of staring into the hypnotic, sleet-streaked darkness. And I was starving. The dull ache in my stomach had become a sharp, insistent pain. I hadn't eaten in nearly 12 hours. I closed my eyes for a brief second and fantasized about a hot cup of coffee, the bitter warmth spreading through my chest. I imagined a grilled cheese sandwich, the simple, perfect comfort of melted cheese and buttery toasted bread. It was a foolish, torturous daydream. I was in the middle of nowhere on a haunted road in a freezing storm. The chances of finding food were zero. That's when I saw it. At first it was just a faint, indistinct glow through the thick, swirling sheets of freezing rain. I blinked, thinking it was a reflection, a trick of my tired eyes. But it grew stronger, more defined. It was a warm, inviting neon glow. As I crept closer, my heart starting to beat a little faster, the shape resolved itself out of the gloom. It was a diner. It was a perfect classic 1950s-style railroad car diner sitting right on the side of this deserted, God-forsaken road. It was an impossibility, a hallucination made of chrome and light. It had big plate glass windows that looked out into the storm, a long counter visible inside, and what looked like red vinyl booths. A simple neon sign in the window buzzed softly, its warm, ruby-red light spelling out a single beautiful word. Eat. It made no sense. It couldn't be real. There were no other buildings, no houses, no signs of life for miles in any direction. A fully operational diner out here, in the middle of nowhere on a night like this, it was absolutely impossible. My first logical thought was that I was finally cracking. I was so exhausted and hungry that my brain had decided to conjure up the very thing I desired most. It was a mirage, but it looked so real. The light from its windows spilled out onto the icy road, creating a shimmering pool of warmth and safety in the hostile, freezing night. I could see steam, real steam, rising from a silver vent on its roof, disappearing into the dark, sleety air. The sight was so welcoming, so powerfully real that my desperation overrode my disbelief. My hunger and exhaustion won the war against my rational mind. Even if it was a mirage, it was the most beautiful and hopeful mirage I had ever seen. I wasn't going to just drive past it. With painstaking care, I began to navigate my rig off the treacherous road and into the small, empty parking lot beside the diner. The lot was gravel, and I could hear the crunch of the ice-coated stones under my tires. As I pulled the air brake, the loud, familiar pshh seemed to echo in the silent night, a sound of arrival. I killed the engine and the sudden silence was profound. I sat there for a long moment just staring at the diner. It was called The Haven. The name was painted in a cheerful, elegant white script on the main window, just below the neon sign. It seemed too perfect, too on the nose. It was either a sign from God or a very, very strange trap. At that moment, I was too hungry to care which. I grabbed my coat and my wallet, my hands trembling slightly from cold and adrenaline. I took a deep breath, a small prayer on my lips, and pushed open the heavy door of my cab. The cold hit me like a physical slap. The freezing rain was relentless, instantly soaking my hair and chilling me to the bone. But the thought of the warmth and the hot meal that might be waiting for me just 50 feet away propelled me forward. I crunched across the icy gravel, my boots slipping slightly, and reached for the diner's glass door. I pulled it open. A small bell, a real physical bell, chimed merrily above my head. I was instantly hit by a wave of blissful warmth and the most incredible smell I had ever encountered. It was the holy trinity of diner smells, the rich, earthy aroma of brewing coffee, the salty, savory scent of bacon sizzling on a griddle, and something sweet and comforting like pancakes or waffles. The inside was exactly as it had appeared from the outside, only more real, more vibrant. A long, spotless chrome counter gleamed under the warm lights, fronted by a row of red vinyl swivel stools that looked brand new. Cozy booths, upholstered in the same cheerful red, lined the big windows. The floor was a classic black and white checkerboard pattern, so clean it shone, and the air was filled with the soft, mellow, jazzy notes of a saxophone, a lazy, beautiful melody playing from a vintage Wurlitzer jukebox that stood glowing in the corner. The place was completely empty. No customers, no cook visible in the back. Just one person. A woman stood behind the counter, her back to me, carefully wiping down the already immaculate surface with a clean white cloth. She was probably in her late 60s with a neat bun of gray hair pinned at the nape of her neck. She wore a simple, dark-colored dress under a pristine white apron tied in a perfect bow at her back. She turned as the bell chimed and her face broke into a warm, genuine smile. Her eyes were kind, crinkly at the corners, the kind of eyes that had seen a lot and had chosen to remain gentle. "Come on in out of that nasty weather, honey," she said. Her voice was a balm, warm and comforting, with a slight, old-fashioned lilt. It was the voice of every favorite grandmother, every kind aunt. "Hang your coat up on the hook there and take a seat anywhere you like. You look half frozen." I felt the tension in my shoulders, which had been up around my ears for the last hour, begin to melt away. I hung my dripping coat on a heavy brass hook by the door and slid into the nearest booth, the one right by the window. The red vinyl was soft and cool against my tired back. The woman came over from behind the counter, holding a laminated menu in one hand and a thick, heavy white ceramic mug in the other. She placed the mug on the table and filled it to the brim with steaming black coffee from a glass pot. "I'm Flo," she said, her smile never wavering. "What can I get for you, dear?" The menu was simple, single-page, classic diner fare. Burgers, sandwiches, breakfast all day. No fancy descriptions, no gourmet ingredients, just good, honest food. My eyes went straight to it. Could I please have a grilled cheese with a side of tomato soup? It felt like the most perfect, most luxurious meal in the entire world. "An excellent choice for a night like this," Flo said with another warm smile. "Coming right up." She took the menu and went back behind the counter, moving with a quiet, efficient grace. I heard the clink of a bowl, the sizzle of butter hitting a hot griddle. I wrapped my cold hands around the warm ceramic mug and took a sip of the coffee. It was, without exaggeration, the best coffee I had ever tasted in my life. It was rich, strong and impossibly smooth with no trace of bitterness. It was like it had been brewed specifically for me at that exact moment. I took another long, slow sip, letting the warmth spread through my chest, chasing away the last of the chill. I looked around the diner again, trying to reconcile its impossible existence with its tangible reality. It was immaculately clean. The chrome gleamed under the soft lights. The checkered floors shone. The salt and pepper shakers on every table were full and polished. There wasn't a speck of dust, not a single stray crumb. It felt preserved, like a museum exhibit of a perfect 1950s diner. But it also felt real and alive and incredibly safe. The fear and the tension that had been my constant companions on the icy road began to melt away completely, replaced by a profound and inexplicable sense of peace. It felt like coming home, even though I had never been here before. A few minutes later, Flo brought my food over on a heavy plate. The soup was a deep, rich red, steaming in its bowl, and the grilled cheese was a masterpiece. It was perfectly golden brown, the bread thick and buttery with a satisfyingly gooey string of melted cheddar stretching from it as I pulled the two halves apart. It was simple food, but it was made with a kind of care and love that I hadn't experienced in years. It tasted like a memory. It tasted like a home-cooked meal from my childhood made by someone who cared. "You're the only one brave enough to be on the road tonight, it seems," Flo said, leaning her elbows on the counter and looking over at me. "Feels like it," I said, my mouth full of cheesy, buttery goodness. I swallowed. "This weather is terrible. I'm surprised you're even open. You can't get much business out here." Flo smiled, but this time it was a little different, a little sad, a little wistful. "Oh, we're always open for those who need us," she said softly. It was a strange, cryptic way to put it, but I was too tired, too warm, and too content to question it. It felt true. We talked for a while as I ate. It was easy, comfortable conversation. I told her about my run, about the absurdity of hauling Christmas decorations through a freezing hellscape. She chuckled at that. She asked about my truck, and her eyes lit up when I described my purple Kenworth. She seemed to genuinely appreciate the beauty of a classic rig. In turn, she told me stories about the diner, about the people who used to come through. I noticed with a slight detached curiosity that she always spoke in the past tense. She talked about the road when it was a main thoroughfare, a bustling artery before the big interstates were built. She described a time of soldiers coming home from the war, of families on their way to vacation at the Jersey Shore, of other truckers like me who saw her diner as a beacon in the night. She spoke of a time that felt long, long ago, a black and white photograph of a world that no longer existed. "This road has seen a lot of stories," she said, her gaze distant, looking out the window at the storm she couldn't possibly see from her place behind the counter. "A lot of joy and a lot of sorrow. It holds on to things." I finished every last bite of my meal, scraping the soup bowl clean. A deep, bone-weary exhaustion began to wash over me, heavier than before. The warmth of the diner, the hot food in my belly, and the soft, jazzy music were a potent sedative. My eyelids felt like they had lead weights attached to them. Flo seemed to notice. "You look all done in, honey," she said gently, her voice full of compassion. "You've got tired eyes. Why don't you rest them for a bit? No one's going to bother you here. You're safe." The thought of getting back into my truck, back into the cold, back onto that treacherous sheet of ice was physically unbearable. The booth was so comfortable, the diner so warm and safe. I knew I shouldn't. A trucker never sleeps in a customer's booth. It's unprofessional. But this didn't feel like a normal place of business. It felt like a sanctuary. "Just for a few minutes," I mumbled, my voice thick with sleep. I slid down in the booth, resting my head against the cool, smooth vinyl of the seat back. I closed my eyes. The last thing I heard was the sweet, mournful sound of the saxophone from the jukebox and the gentle, rhythmic clinking of Flo cleaning up behind the counter. I was woken by a jarring, cold, gray light on my face. I blinked, my eyes gritty and unfocused. I was disoriented, my mind foggy. I wasn't in a warm, cozy diner, I was in my truck. I was slumped uncomfortably over the massive steering wheel of my Kenworth, my neck stiff and screaming in protest. A dull ache radiated from my shoulder where it had been pressed against the driver's side door. I sat up straight, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs. I was confused. Had I dreamed it all? The diner, the warmth, the kind woman named Flo, the perfect grilled cheese? It had felt so intensely, vividly real. The smells, the sounds, the taste of the coffee. I looked out the window. I was parked in the same muddy patch on the side of Clinton Road where I had pulled in hours before. The freezing rain had stopped. A weak, watery winter sun was trying to break through a thick blanket of gray clouds. The world was silent save for the dripping of water from the ice-coated trees. My eyes shot to the spot where the diner had been. There was nothing there. It wasn't just closed or dark or boarded up. It was gone, completely and utterly gone. Where the warm, glowing chrome and neon building had stood, there was now only an old, crumbling stone foundation, choked with dead weeds and skeletal ice-covered saplings. The ruins looked ancient, as if they had been abandoned for 50 years or more, slowly being reclaimed by the relentless forest. There was no sign of a gravel parking lot, no shattered neon sign, no building, just ruins. My heart hammered in my chest. It had to be a dream, a powerful, detailed hallucination brought on by extreme exhaustion and hunger. It was the only logical explanation. I was about to accept that, to write it off as a strange trick of a tired mind, when I saw it. Sitting on my passenger seat, upright and perfectly placed in the center of the cushion, was a thick, white ceramic mug. The same heavy, comforting mug that Flo had served my coffee in. I reached out with a trembling hand and touched it. It was empty, but it was still faintly, impossibly warm to the touch. And next to it, folded neatly in half, was a small, yellowed piece of paper. A receipt. My breath caught in my throat. I picked it up. The paper was thick and brittle, like it was very old. The receipt was handwritten in a beautiful, elegant, old-fashioned cursive script. It read, 1 grilled cheese, 1 tomato soup, 1 coffee. There was no total, no tax. At the bottom of the slip in the same graceful handwriting was a short note. Paid in full. Safe travels, honey. I stared at the note, then at the warm, empty mug, then back at the overgrown ancient ruins outside my window. It wasn't a dream. It was real. All of it. I had spent the night in a diner that didn't exist, served by a woman who couldn't possibly be there. A ghost diner. A haven. A port in a storm for a lost, tired trucker on a dangerous night. It wasn't scary, not like the other stories you hear about this road, the ones filled with malice and terror. This was beautiful. And deeply, profoundly strange. It was a moment of impossible, gentle kindness in a place known for its darkness. It was a glitch in time, a warm memory that had, for a few hours, become solid again just for me. I carefully, reverently placed the ceramic mug and the handwritten receipt in my glove compartment, among my maps and registration papers. They are my souvenirs from a place that doesn't exist. My proof of an impossible night. I started Kenny's engine, and the familiar, powerful rumble was the most comforting sound in the world. I pulled back onto the road. In the light of day, the ice had begun to melt. The sun was a little brighter. The road was just a road again. I don't know what the haven was. A time slip? A collective memory of a kinder time given form? A guardian angel in the shape of a diner? I don't have any answers, and I don't think I ever will. But I know that it saved me. It gave me a hot meal when I was starving, a safe place to rest when I was exhausted, and a story that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. And sometimes, on a long, lonely night when the miles stretch on forever and the world feels cold and empty, I'll pull over and open my glove compartment. I'll take out that old ceramic mug, and I'll remember the impossible warmth, the taste of the perfect coffee, and the kindness of a ghost named Flo in a diner that only stands until dawn. My name is Samuel Holt. I'm 55 years old, and I've been driving a truck for more than 30 of them. I'm a creature of habit and routine. I drive the same routes, eat at the same diners, listen to the same classic rock stations. My rig is my sanctuary, a rolling fortress of solitude. I have one cardinal rule, a rule that's been drilled into truckers for generations. You don't pick up hitchhikers, ever. It's a safety issue, a liability. You don't know who they are, what they're carrying, or what they're running from. It's a rule I had never broken, not once, until that night. The night I broke my own rule on a road where all rules of logic and reason ceased to apply. It was a crisp, clear autumn night, the kind where the air is so cold and clean it feels like it could shatter. I was hauling a load of dry goods, making a familiar run through northern New Jersey. I was ahead of schedule, feeling good, the rumble of the engine a comforting friend. Then came the call over the radio. A multi-car pileup on the interstate, a complete shutdown. My dispatcher, a young kid who relied too much on his computer, suggested a detour. The name on the screen was Clinton Road. I knew the name. I'd been a trucker long enough to hear all the tall tales, the phantom trucks, the strange lights, the ghost boy. I'd always chuckled at them. To me, the scariest things on the road were black ice and tired drivers. But the dispatcher was insistent. It was the only way to avoid being stuck for hours. Reluctantly, I agreed. The road was as unsettling as its reputation suggested. It was a narrow, winding ribbon of asphalt cutting through a forest so dark it seemed to drink the light from my high beams. The silence was the most unnerving part. No other cars, no houses, just the lonely sound of my truck moving through the sleeping woods. It felt like a place outside of time, a forgotten corner of the world. I'd been driving for maybe 15 minutes, my hands tight on the wheel, when I saw him. A figure standing on the thin, grassy shoulder, thumb out. A hitchhiker. He was just a silhouette against the dark trees, his form illuminated by my approaching headlights. He was tall and thin, wearing a long, dark coat that seemed too heavy for the weather. His head was bowed, a wide-brimmed hat obscuring his face. Every instinct, every year of training and experience screamed at me to keep going. Don't stop. Don't even slow down. It's the rule. But something made me hesitate. Maybe it was the profound loneliness of the road, the sheer desolation of the scene. To be out here on foot in the middle of the night. The man must be in some serious trouble. His car must have broken down miles back. He could freeze to death out here. Against my better judgment, I felt a pang of sympathy, a flicker of human decency that would prove to be a terrible mistake. I slowed the truck, the air brakes hissing like a startled snake. I pulled over about 20 feet past him, leaving the engine running. I watched him in my side mirror as he walked toward the cab. He moved with a strange gliding motion, his feet seeming to barely touch the ground. He came up to the passenger side door. I leaned over and rolled down the window. The cold night air rushing in. "You need a ride?" I asked, my voice gruff. He looked up, but the shadow from his hat still hid his face. All I could see was a dark, hollow space where his features should have been. "I would be most grateful," he said. His voice was strange. It was a low, raspy whisper, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. It was impossible to tell his age. It sounded ancient and young at the same time. "Where are you headed?" I asked, my hand still hovering near the gear shift, ready to pull away. "Just down the road," he whispered. "There's a turnoff. I'll know it when I see it." It was vague, but on this road there weren't many options. I hesitated for another second. My gut was churning, telling me this was wrong, but I had already stopped. It seemed crueler to drive away now. "All right," I sighed, "get in." But no funny business. He didn't reply. He just opened the door and slid into the passenger seat. The cab was instantly filled with a strange, cold air and a faint, musty smell like damp earth and old books. He closed the door with a soft click and sat perfectly still, his hands folded in his lap, his face still hidden by the shadows of his hat. I put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the road. The silence in the cab was deafening. The man didn't move, didn't speak. He just sat there, a statue of shadows. I tried to make conversation, to break the unnerving quiet. "So, car break down?" I asked. "I don't drive," he whispered, his voice seeming to come from all around me. "Right. So, where are you coming from?" He was silent for a long moment. "A place that is no longer there," he finally rasped. The cryptic answers were starting to seriously unnerve me. I glanced over at him. He hadn't moved a muscle. He was staring straight ahead at the road, but I had the distinct feeling he wasn't seeing it. He was looking at something else, something far away. I noticed his coat was old-fashioned, made of a heavy, dark wool. It looked like something out of a history book. And it wasn't wet, even though the ground had been damp. "You live around here?" I tried again, my voice tight. "I am a frequent visitor," he whispered. The conversation was going nowhere, and each whispered reply sent a fresh wave of unease through me. I decided to shut up and just drive. I turned the radio on, hoping some music would dispel the oppressive atmosphere. The moment the music started playing, the man flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. "Would you mind?" he whispered, gesturing vaguely toward the radio. "The noise is distracting." I turned it off. The heavy, suffocating silence returned, thicker than before. I was now genuinely scared. This wasn't a normal person. This wasn't just a guy who needed a ride. My heart was pounding. I wanted him out of my truck. "So, this turnoff," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is it coming up soon?" "Soon," he rasped. "It's not a place you can find on a map. You have to feel it. It's a road that leads away." "Away from what?" I wanted to ask, but I was too afraid of the answer. We drove on in silence for what felt like an eternity. The road twisted and turned, a hypnotic, endless loop of darkness. I started to feel disoriented, unsure of how long I had been driving or how far I had gone. Then the man spoke again, his whisper cutting through the silence. "There," he said, lifting a long, pale finger and pointing toward the woods on the right. "Just there." I slowed down, looking for a road, a path, anything. There was nothing, just a solid, impenetrable wall of ancient trees. "There's nothing there," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "To you, perhaps," he whispered, "but it is my stop. You can let me out here." I didn't need to be told twice. I slammed on the brakes, bringing the rig to a screeching halt in the middle of the road. I didn't care if another car came. I wanted him out. Now. "Thank you for the ride," he said in that same dry, rustling voice. He opened the door and stepped out into the darkness. He didn't look back. He just walked toward the line of trees. I watched him, my breath held tight in my chest, expecting him to be swallowed by the woods, but he wasn't. He walked toward the trees, and where there should have been solid trunks and tangled undergrowth, a path opened up. It wasn't a physical path of dirt and gravel. It was more like the world itself parted for him. A shimmering, indistinct trail of faint gray light appeared before him, leading deep into the black heart of the forest. It was a road made of moonlight and shadow, a path to nowhere. He walked onto it without hesitation and was swallowed by the darkness. The path faded and the woods were just woods again. I sat there, my mind completely blown. I was hyperventilating, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't grip the steering wheel. I had just given a ride to something that wasn't human, and I had watched him walk down a road that did not exist. I finally managed to get the truck moving, my foot pressing the accelerator to the floor. I drove with a reckless, desperate speed, not caring about the turns or the bumps. I just had to get away. As I sped down the road, I glanced at the passenger seat, half expecting to see him still sitting there. The seat was empty, but the cold was still there, a deep, unnatural cold that seemed to have soaked into the vinyl itself. And on the seat where he had been sitting was a single dead leaf. It was a dark, brittle oak leaf, the kind you see in the deepest parts of winter, long after all the other leaves have turned to dust. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to. It felt like a token, a reminder of my passenger, a piece of the other place he had brought into my truck. When I finally escaped Clinton Road and hit the main highway, I pulled into the first brightly lit truck stop I could find. I left the engine running, got out and just stood in the artificial light, breathing in the smell of diesel and greasy food, the smells of the real world. I opened the passenger door and left it open for almost an hour, hoping the cold, musty air would leave my cab. I never told anyone the full story. I just said I had a weird fare, but I know what I saw. I broke my one rule, and in doing so I gave a ride to a ghost, a traveler between worlds, a being who walks the hidden paths. I picked up a hitchhiker who asked for a ride to nowhere, and I watched him go home. And to this day, the passenger seat in my truck sometimes feels unnaturally cold, and I can never shake the feeling that a part of that ancient whispering darkness is still riding along with me. My name is Janet Cole. I'm 32. I'm what they call a hotshot trucker. I don't drive a big 18-wheeler. I have a heavy-duty pickup, a Ram 3500 and a 40-foot gooseneck trailer. I specialize in expedited freight, smaller, time-sensitive loads that need to get somewhere yesterday. It's a fast-paced, high-stress job, and I love it. I'm used to driving all night, to pushing the limits of myself and my truck. I'm a problem solver. If a road is blocked, I find a way around. I'm not afraid of the dark, or at least I wasn't, not before Clinton Road. Not before I learned that some things that move in the dark aren't just shadows, they are the shadow. It was a sweltering night in July, the air so thick with humidity it felt like you were breathing water. I was hauling a custom-fabricated metal part from a shop in rural Pennsylvania to a shipyard in Boston. The part was critical. A whole team was waiting on it to finish a repair. I was already behind schedule due to a delay at the fabrication shop. Every minute counted. Naturally, the interstate was a disaster. A tanker fire had shut down all northbound lanes. My GPS, usually my best friend, was frantically trying to reroute me, sending me on a wild goose chase through a maze of suburban streets. Frustrated, I zoomed out on the map, looking for a more direct path. I saw a thin, dark line that seemed to cut straight through the mess. Clinton Road. I'd heard whispers about it, but they were just stories. I was a professional with a deadline. I didn't have time for ghost stories. I took the turn. The atmosphere changed instantly. The air grew colder, the oppressive humidity replaced by a damp, clammy chill. The road was a claustrophobic tunnel of trees, my headlights barely making a dent in the inky blackness. My truck, which usually felt so powerful and solid, seemed small and vulnerable. I was on high alert, my senses dialed up to 11. The road was rough and uneven, and I had to keep my speed down, which only added to my frustration. I was navigating a particularly sharp curve when it happened. It was a flicker of movement on the passenger side of my truck. I glanced over, thinking it was a branch or a large bird. It was neither. It was a shadow. But it wasn't a shadow cast by something. It was a shadow with substance, a piece of the night that had detached itself from the rest. It was vaguely humanoid in shape, tall and unnaturally thin with long, spindly limbs. And it was moving. It was keeping pace with my truck running alongside it in the dense woods. It moved with a horrifying fluid grace, its form shifting and contorting as it dodged trees and bushes. It wasn't running like a person. It was flowing like liquid darkness. My mind refused to accept what I was seeing. It had to be a trick of the light, my headlights reflecting off the trees in a strange way. I blinked hard, trying to clear my vision, but it was still there. A solid three-dimensional void of blackness running through the woods. Then it did something that shattered my denial completely. It leaped. In a single, impossible bound, it cleared the ditch on the side of the road and landed on the asphalt right next to my truck. There was no sound, no impact. It just arrived. It was now running on the pavement right beside my passenger door, its featureless head level with my window. I screamed. It was an involuntary, guttural cry of pure terror. I stomped on the accelerator, the powerful diesel engine roaring in protest. The truck surged forward, but the shadow kept pace effortlessly. It was like it was tethered to me, a dark reflection I couldn't shake. I stared at it, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. It had no face, no eyes, no features at all. It was a perfect silhouette, a hole in the world. But I could feel it watching me. I could feel its cold, empty attention focused entirely on me, on the inside of my cab. And then it reached for the truck. A long, spindly arm of pure blackness stretched out from its body. The arm elongated, defying all physics, and its hand, a formless claw of shadow, grabbed onto the bottom of my passenger side window. I heard a sound then, a low scraping noise like dragging metal. It was the sound of its form making contact with the solid steel of my door. This wasn't a hallucination. It was real. It was touching my truck. With a horrifying spider-like agility, it began to climb. It used its grip on the window to pull itself up the side of the door. Another shadowy limb reached up and grabbed onto the roof rack. It was climbing onto my moving truck. I was losing my mind. I was screaming, though I couldn't hear my own voice over the pounding in my ears. I swerved the truck violently to the left, then to the right, trying to shake it off. The trailer fishtailed behind me, the tires screeching in protest. But the shadow clung to the side of my truck like it was part of it, its form rippling but its grip unbreakable. It pulled itself up until its head was above the window line. It peered down into the cab. I was looking up at a faceless head of pure darkness, an abyss staring down at me, and I heard a voice. It wasn't a voice that came through my ears, it was a voice that bloomed inside my head, a cold, dead whisper that bypassed sound itself. Get out. The two words were a command, an eviction notice. It wanted my truck. It wanted my space. It wanted to be inside. The terror gave way to a surge of pure, defiant rage. This was my truck, my sanctuary, and this thing was not getting in. With a guttural roar of my own, I yanked the steering wheel hard to the right, aiming for a massive, thick-branched oak tree that was right at the edge of the road. My plan was insane, suicidal. I was going to shear it off, even if it meant wrecking my truck. I braced for impact, closing my eyes for a split second. The passenger side of my truck scraped against the tree with a deafening shriek of tearing metal and splintering wood. The whole truck shuddered violently, and I was thrown against my door. The side mirror exploded, branches clawed at the window, one of them cracking the glass. But the impact had worked. I looked over. The shadow was gone. The force of the impact, the collision with something solid and real, must have dislodged it. I didn't see it fall. I didn't see it run away. It was just gone. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I drove on, my truck battered and groaning, a spiderweb of cracks spreading across my passenger window. I was sobbing, a messy, hysterical combination of fear and relief. When I finally broke free from Clinton Road and emerged back into the world of streetlights and civilization, I pulled into a gas station, the lights feeling like a holy sanctuary. I got out of the truck on shaking legs and inspected the damage. The entire passenger side was a mess. The paint was scraped away. There were long, deep gouges in the metal of the door and the side of the truck bed. The side mirror was completely gone. A thick branch was still embedded in the roof rack. It looked like I had sideswiped a massive tree, which I had. But as I ran my trembling hand over the damage, I found something else. Amidst the scratches and dents from the tree, there were other marks. 5 parallel gouges right below the window. They were thin, unnaturally straight, and had scraped the metal down to the primer. They weren't from the tree. They looked like claw marks. But they were cold to the touch, impossibly cold. I finished the delivery to Boston. I was late, but I made it. I told the company I fell asleep at the wheel and hit a tree. It was easier than trying to explain the truth. They put me on probation and made me pay for the repairs. I still drive. I still do the hotshot runs. But something changed in me that night. I'm no longer afraid of the dark. I am terrified of what moves within it. I have learned that shadows are not just the absence of light. Some of them are hungry, some of them are waiting. And on a dark road in New Jersey, I met one that wanted to get in. And I have the scars on my truck and on my soul to prove it. My name is Robert King. I'm 44 and I'm a tanker driver. I haul gasoline. It's a job that demands precision, focus, and a healthy respect for the 8,000 gallons of explosive liquid I'm pulling. You can't afford to make mistakes. You can't afford to get lost. You have to trust your maps, your senses, and your direction. I've always had an excellent sense of direction. I can navigate the most complex city grids, the most confusing rural back roads. I've never been truly lost in my life. But Clinton Road isn't a place you navigate. It's a place that navigates you. It's a trap, a maze without walls. And that night, it decided it wasn't finished with me. It was a foggy, moonless night in late autumn, the kind of night that feels like a shroud. I was on my way to a 24-hour gas station in a small town in upstate New York for a pre-dawn delivery. My usual route was closed due to a rock slide, a common occurrence in that hilly part of the state. I consulted my atlas and saw a road that seemed to be a perfect, if winding, detour. Clinton Road. I'd heard the name, of course. The trucker grapevine is full of stories about it. But I'm a practical man. A road is a road, or so I thought. The fog was the first sign that this road was different. It wasn't a natural fog. It rolled in thick and fast, a suffocating, silent blanket that swallowed my headlights and reduced my visibility to near zero. It clung to the road, swirling in hypnotic, disorienting patterns. I was forced to slow my tanker to a crawl, my eyes straining to follow the faint painted line on the edge of the asphalt. After what felt like an hour of tense, slow driving, I crossed a small, unremarkable concrete bridge. It arched over a dark, still body of water that I assumed was part of the reservoir. I noted it as a landmark, a sign of progress. I drove on, the road twisting and turning through the dense, dark woods. The fog was relentless, and the oppressive silence was broken only by the low rumble of my engine. I drove for another 20 minutes, maybe 30. It was hard to tell. Time seemed to warp in the fog. I was getting anxious, feeling like I should have reached the end of the road by now. I was looking for any sign of civilization, any change in the scenery. And then I saw it up ahead, a bridge. I felt a small sense of relief. Another landmark. It meant I was still making progress. As I got closer, a strange feeling of déjà vu washed over me. The bridge looked familiar. It was a small concrete arch spanning a dark body of water. It looked exactly like the bridge I had crossed half an hour ago. "That's weird," I muttered, shaking my head. "Must be a standard design for this area." I crossed the bridge and drove on, pushing the unsettling familiarity from my mind. The road continued its serpentine path through the fog-choked forest. I drove and drove, my eyes glued to the road. I passed a distinctive lightning-scarred oak tree on my left. I passed a small, muddy pull-off on my right. I kept driving, the minutes ticking by. I was sure, absolutely sure, that I had to be nearing the end. And then, through the swirling fog, I saw the unmistakable silhouette of a bridge. My blood ran cold. It couldn't be. I slowed the tanker to a near stop, my heart pounding against my ribs. It was the same bridge, the same concrete arch, the same dark water below. It was impossible. I hadn't turned around. The road hadn't forked. I had been driving straight. A wave of panic began to rise in my throat. I grabbed my CB radio. "Breaker 19, is anyone on this godforsaken road? Anyone got a copy?" Only static answered. "This is a joke," I said, my voice trembling. "This has to be a joke." I crossed the bridge again, my mind racing. I was a logical man. There had to be a rational explanation. Maybe the road was a loop, a scenic circle that my map didn't show. But it felt too small for that. I hadn't been driving long enough to complete a loop of any significant size. I decided to pay closer attention. I would look for proof. I drove on, my senses on high alert. There it was again, the lightning-scarred oak tree on my left. A few minutes later, the muddy pull-off on my right. My stomach twisted into a knot. I was on the exact same stretch of road. I kept driving, my knuckles white on the wheel, a desperate hope warring with a rising tide of terror. I prayed that this time it would be different. That this time the road would lead me out. And then I saw the bridge. It was waiting for me, emerging from the fog like a recurring nightmare. I slammed on the brakes, the tanker groaning to a halt just before the entrance to the bridge. I couldn't do it. I couldn't cross it again. I was trapped. I was in a loop, a glitch in reality, a piece of road that was stuck on repeat. The road wasn't taking me anywhere, it was just leading me back to the beginning. Back to this bridge. I sat there for a long time, the engine idling, the fog swirling around my cab like lost souls. The panic subsided, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. This wasn't a natural phenomenon. The road was doing this. It was playing with me. It was a predator, and I was its prey, trapped in its maze. I thought about turning around, but what was the point? If the road forward led back here, what would the road back lead to? Would it just be another longer loop? Or would it simply refuse to let me go, twisting and turning until I ran out of fuel? The thought of being stranded here in this endless cycle was more terrifying than anything I could imagine. I had to try something different. I had to break the pattern. I looked at the bridge. The stories I'd heard came flooding back. The ghost of a boy, phantom cars. This bridge was a focal point, a center of gravity for the road's strangeness. Maybe the loop wasn't the road itself, but the bridge. Maybe the bridge was resetting my journey every time I crossed it. I had a crazy, desperate idea. I wasn't going to cross the bridge. I was going to go backwards. I put the massive tanker in reverse. It was an incredibly difficult and dangerous maneuver on a narrow, foggy road. The trailer's backup alarm began to beep, a frantic, piercing sound in the dead quiet. Using my mirrors, which reflected only a swirling wall of white, I began to slowly, painstakingly back the rig up. I backed past the muddy pull-off. I backed past the lightning-scarred oak. I kept going, my neck screaming in protest, my arms aching from wrestling the wheel. I backed up for what felt like miles, and then I saw something in my side mirror. It wasn't the bridge, it was a pair of headlights. A wave of relief so powerful it almost made me weep washed over me. Another car, another person. I wasn't alone. I stopped the truck and waited, my hazard lights flashing. The car approached slowly, its headlights cutting through the fog. It pulled up alongside my cab. The window rolled down, and a park ranger leaned out. He looked old, weathered, with a kind but tired face. "You all right there, son?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. "Bit of a strange way to be driving." "I'm lost," I said, my voice cracking. "I'm trapped. This road, it keeps taking me back to the same bridge." The ranger nodded slowly, a look of deep sadness in his eyes. He had heard this before. "Yeah," he said softly. "She does that sometimes. Gets a bit possessive. You did the right thing. Going forward just keeps you in the loop. Sometimes you have to go backwards to get out." He gave me directions. Simple, clear directions that made no sense on any map, but I trusted him implicitly. "Keep going back for another mile. You'll see a small unmarked service road on your left. It looks like a dead end, but it's not. It'll take you out to Route 23. Don't stop and don't look back." "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." He just tipped his hat. "Drive safe," he said. And then he drove on, his taillights disappearing into the fog, in the direction of the bridge. I did exactly as he said. I backed up for another mile, my eyes scanning the left side of the road. And there it was, a tiny, almost invisible opening in the trees. It didn't look like a road at all, but I turned my rig into it. The path was rough and unpaved, but it was straight. And 5 minutes later, I saw the glorious, beautiful, heavenly sight of the streetlights and traffic of Route 23. I was out. I pulled my tanker over, my body trembling with exhaustion and residual fear. I thought about the ranger. He had been heading toward the bridge, into the loop. Was it his job to patrol this haunted road, or was he too a part of it? A helpful spirit, a counterbalance to the road's malevolence? I'll never know. I delivered my gasoline that morning, the rising sun feeling like a resurrection. I never told my company why I was late. I just said I got lost in the fog. But I know the truth. I wasn't lost. I was found. I was captured by a road that feeds on direction and time, a road that leads only to itself. And I learned that sometimes the only way to escape a nightmare is to have the courage to stop moving forward and face the darkness you left behind. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, let me know in the comments which one chilled you the most. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Horror Whispers for more terrifying tales.